Well, good morning again, and welcome to the fourth of our talks about Paul's letter to the churches in Galatia. Today's session will focus on chapter 4. And today I think we see two sides of Paul's ministry and the way he presented himself. Yes, we see the same coherent and persuasive writer at work. But I think we also see today something of the vulnerable minister, someone who has been wounded by people, especially people who he thought he could have counted on. Today's reading comes from Galatians chapter 4, beginning at verse 1. It's quite a long reading. Please bear with me. What I am saying is that as long as the heir is a child, he is no different from a slave, although he owns the whole estate. He is subject to guardians and trustees until the time set by his father. So also, when we were children, we were in slavery and under the basic principles of the world. But when the time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under law, to redeem those under law, that we might receive the full rights of sons. Because you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son, and since you are a son, God has made you also an heir. Formerly, when you did not know God, you were slaves to those who by nature are not gods. But now that you know God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you are turning back to those weak and miserable principles? Do you wish to be enslaved by them all over again? You are observing special days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you that somehow I have wasted my efforts on you. I plead with you, brothers, become like me, for I became like you. You have done me no wrong. As you know, it was because of an illness that I first preached the gospel to you. Even though my illness was a trial to you, you did not treat me with contempt or scorn. Instead, you welcomed me as if I were an angel of God, as if I were Christ Jesus himself. What has happened to all your joy? I can testify that if you could have done so, you would have torn out your eyes and given them to me. Have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? Those people are zealous to win you over, but for no good. What they want is to alienate you from us, so that you may be zealous for them. It is fine to be zealous, provided the purpose is good, and to be always, and not just when I am with you. My dear children, for whom I am again in pains of childbirth, until Christ is formed in you, how I wish I could be with you now, and change my tone, because I am perplexed about you. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, today's chapter with Paul begins by his re-emphasizing the central arguments of his letter, that the churches in Galatia should hold fast to what he had taught them on a previous occasion. And that message, to repeat quite simply, was that they needed to be made good with God, and that this could only be done through placing their faith and their trust in Jesus, and by no other means. It's through Jesus that we receive the fullness of life and the freedom that God intended for us. We mustn't allow ourselves to be trapped again by those who are now telling us that in addition we must also become Jewish and observe all the Jewish laws and customs. That would be a route back to slavery. I really like chapter 4 because it shows two aspects of Paul's ministry among the Gentiles. And those two aspects overlap and they reinforce each other in a way that makes Paul's argument, I think, stronger and more persuasive. To begin with, in the first 7 verses, we see Paul engaging his brain to deliver an argument that, as usual, is clear and coherent and well illustrated. It's an exercise of his mind. He delivers his argument through a series of quite clever points and quite good illustrations. Let's listen to those arguments again, but this time in my words. I've paraphrased them for you slightly. And Paul is saying this: heirs are no more free than slaves, despite the fact that a bright future may lie ahead. Until a particular time, which is decided upon by the Father, they remain curtailed by guardians and trustees. And in a similar way, until God decided to send Jesus into our world, we too lived captive lives. We were enslaved by ancient laws that we couldn't keep. And Jesus came to free us from that bondage so that we could become true heirs of God, living in freedom and energized by the Spirit within us. We were slaves no longer, but God's children, enjoying an intimate relationship with him through Jesus. We were a new creation. We were children of God through faith. We're heirs of God's promise. And with him, our destiny is sealed. Powerful, eloquent words. But then in verse 8 and right through to verse 20, we see Paul amending, changing his approach. And he now engages, I think, the heart of a true pastor. His arguments now become personal. They become more emotional. There's a hint of desperation in his pleading with the Galatians. He can't hide his personal disappointment that they've allowed themselves to be hoodwinked by these false teachers. They need quite urgently to get back on track. And in these verses you can almost hear Paul calling out to them. Why? Why are you turning back? I fear for you. I wonder whether my efforts have been wasted on you. I plead with you, brothers and sisters. You treated me so well, as if I were an angel of God. But where is your blessing of me now? My dear children, I am in pain for you. You worry me enormously. These are the words of a pastor who truly cares passionately for his flock. He knows that they're being led astray, and he knows that they must be rescued. He is now experiencing the personal and emotional pain of ministry, the pain, the frustration and the disappointment that comes when those that you had counted on for support begin to be distracted and drift away before your very eyes. Painful. Two components of Paul's armoury as an apostle: his heart and his mind, and he uses them both as the need arises in order to be a more effective conveyor of God's good news. I wonder what lessons there are for us today by listening to Paul's words. Perhaps we can reflect on just 3 things. I wonder if we can reflect first of all on who has God entrusted to our care. Who is he asking us to tend as members of a flock today? Who has God put on our hearts? To whom has he called you and I to share the good news of the gospel? Maybe our friends, maybe our family, maybe our work colleagues, maybe our neighbours. Who knows? Paul was an apostle to the Gentiles. Peter was an apostle to the Jews. Who are we apostles to? Who have we been called and sent to minister to? And what gifts what gifts or what tools of persuasion do we have? What are we equipped with? What do we have at our disposal to convey the good news of the gospel? Perhaps some of us have great storytelling abilities that will engage young children. Some of us may be good at sharing personal testimonies that will engage adults. Some of us may have great life experiences that we want to share about our life with God in a way that people become curious and interested. They want to know more about Jesus. Perhaps some of us have an ability and have an opportunity to reach out into the community beyond, taking Jesus to the people through random acts of kindness, practical kindness, through acts of generosity and compassion. What gifts, what tools of persuasion do we have? And finally, will we use those gifts? Will we use those opportunities to tell out the good news of Jesus? A word of caution though, there will be setbacks, there will be disappointments, people will frustrate us, people will hurt us. We will need to invest of ourselves, and this often comes at a cost, a personal cost. There'll be times when we feel maybe that our efforts are wasted, but like Paul, we must persevere, perhaps considering it a privilege to share in the pains of the apostles of Jesus who went before us. A lot to be thinking about today, I think. Tomorrow we're going to explore what Paul meant by being children of freedom. What does freedom mean? What does it entail? Looking forward to that session tomorrow morning with you. Hope to see you then. Same time, same place. In the meantime, have a good day and God bless you.